Welcome to the Below the Line podcast. My name is David Duggan, and I'm one of the members of a team made up of experts from the worlds of business, elite sport, adventure, and health and well-being. We are coaches, mentors, and advisors to some of the world's biggest companies and organisations, as well as smaller businesses, entrepreneurs, and people looking to make their mark on the world. Whether it's leadership, business, coaching, health, or simply life in general, we're really talking about performance. Our ability to show up as brilliantly as possible into all of these situations for ourselves and those around us. Each week, I sit down with a member of our team or an invited guest to discuss a performance-related topic connected to their area of expertise. We keep it short and sweet so that you can extract all the good stuff and get on with the rest of your day, and hopefully put some of our knowledge, experience, and expertise into play for yourself. This week, I am talking to a very special guest, John O'Gorman, executive coach and co-creator and founder of Growth Pit Stop, a business focusing on measuring, modelling and unlocking performance in critical teams and vital projects. Based on his extensive experience of coaching executive teams and organisations across the world, I wanted to ask John for his thoughts on what he sees as being the key challenges facing executive teams right now, and what advice he has for any leader or team looking to achieve and deliver on their goals and ambitions over the next 12 months. As someone who works with and through the metaphor of Formula One racing, you may be surprised to hear that for John, the answer to higher levels of performance and results does not lie in pressing the collective accelerator down to work faster, harder and longer. Instead, he suggests that teams need to slow down at key moments to pause, reflect and engage in strategic conversations, as well as keeping a close eye on the key metrics of performance potential, pressure, vitality and collaboration. You can subscribe at www.belowtheline.ie, where you can stay up to date with our podcast, as well as exclusive online events and sessions, including our next story coaching program, which kicks off on the 15th of November. Thanks for listening and see you next week. What do you see as being the key challenges that you expect to see teams facing in 2022?
Okay, so a lot of people talk about alignment being a challenge for teams, for top teams. But alignment can go in many different ways. There's alignment of how people work. There's alignment around the absolute strategic initiatives that the people need to deliver. And there's alignment with strategy. So again, alignment can get very complicated. So I guess what we see is the big challenge right now is this gap between what the strategy says and getting things executed. So I guess we see a gap there, and organizations need to be aware of that gap. Leaders and managers need to be aware of that gap, and cross-functional teams need to be aware of that gap. And what can cause the gap? Well, lots of various different things can cause the gap between strategy and execution. But one of the things that we would find that organizations are missing out on, obviously, is this strategic conversation, the conversation that doesn't necessarily happen because of the business of the day-to-day stuff that's going on. And strategic conversation doesn't have to mean hours in big long meeting rooms and around a coffee table. A strategic conversation can be shorter, sharper, and what we would describe in our world as pit stops. Yeah, so you find what's working, you find what's not, you have a conversation around that. And sometimes some of the conversations can be tough conversations to have because they can be about how we collaborate. They can sometimes be about trust and respect. They can be lots of various different things in the pit stop model that you're quite familiar with. So I think this broad alignment is a big issue. So if I hit pause on that and then I ask people who are listening to this a question or a couple of questions. One of the questions is if I put the leadership team together, or the team that's responsible for the implementation of a strategic initiative, what are the key priorities for that leadership team? What's important now for that leadership team? I know one of your colleagues, Jerry, talks about WIN, what's important now. So what's really important now? What are the priorities for what you're trying to deliver? And is there alignment around those key priorities? And a laser-like focus around those key priorities. And our data would suggest, the data that we gather would suggest that in most teams, cross-functional teams, and indeed teams just in senior leadership teams, is that there's opportunities to drive a performance gain in getting a laser-like focus on what's really important now, and that it's stuck to. That's number one. So I guess the question I'd ask is there a laser-like focus on your key priorities? Top 3, top 4. That's one. The second thing is what are the absolute top 3 to 4 key results that this team are responsible for? And is there, again, not only clarity, but is there confidence around getting those results? So sometimes there's clarity, but there isn't as much confidence, and you've got to unpack that. Yeah. And we're a big fan of purpose and why teams exist. But in this period of time that we're in, we talk about what is a fit for purpose. What's the purpose that's going to get this team through 2020-22, as opposed to the purpose, the infinite purpose, the 2022. What is that? So we talk about alignment at those 3 levels: priority, results, and fit for purpose. So is there a laser-like focus on key priorities? Is there absolute confidence and clarity regarding results? And does the team, is it fired up by a fit for purpose? 3 key things. And I think if any team could just explore those things and get them on paper, and we're big fans of on one pages, as opposed to, many of our clients work in big organizations, and we've seen the 101 slide deck, and each slide costing a couple of grand to create. And when the leadership, when they're being reviewed, they're not even getting beyond slide 3 or 4. I don't know, is that something that your listeners will resonate with, but onto tables of priorities, results, and purpose. So that's one of the things. The other thing that we're seeing in the teams that we work with and we're encouraging is they may have 3 key strategic priorities or 3 key priorities, but we encourage them to have a 4th priority, which is themselves. So are the teams looking after themselves? Do they see themselves as a priority? And a lot of people look at sport, and we use the metaphor for Formula One to get people to engage in the principles. But if you look at any sport, what do the team sport do? They invest in the team, time in the team. So our business teams invest in enough time in themselves, and do they see themselves as a strategic priority? And are they able to look in on themselves and say, where are our performance gains and losses? And what do we celebrate? Which again is something that maybe it's been tough to do, but what do we celebrate? What's the progress? Where's the momentum? Where are the wins? And then where are some of the things we can work on? There's a bunch of things there that you could get in and unpack, but that's what there are some of the things that we're seeing. You cannot separate the team from the work they're doing. Sounds obvious, and we talk about working through 2 doors: critical teams and critical initiatives. The critical team, or the team, has initiatives they need to deliver. You work on both together. You don't just work on the team on their own, bring them to various workshops or sessions online, and hopefully in Q1 next year back face to face. You got to bring them together to work on the work that's important, because then you make the connection and you improve ways of working. So one of the things that we measure is what we call return on collaboration, and most of the teams that we work in have up to anywhere between 20 and 25% potential performance gain in the area of collaboration, improving how they collaborate and driving value in collaboration, not necessarily within their own team, but across the organizations that, the organization that they work in. So if you ask every member of your team what percentage of the time they spend working together is valuable, and get a percentage on that and do a rough calculation, maybe let's say 80, 85, 90%. Well, that's 10% of time that may be invaluable, but our data would suggest it's anywhere from to 20 or 25% when you bring in, working across teams and across organizations, because it's complex. And I might add, one of the things that I'd say is everybody that we're working with is working very hard. They're driving out for their key performance indicators. We're not saying that people are doing things out of badness, because they're not. And just this area of collaboration, how do you measure it? Putting a number on it and then talking about it. And sometimes it can be difficult to talk about. So the concept of a return on collaboration, what is the return on collaboration within the team, and between then the team and the stakeholders that they've got? And that's really really interesting, and that's what we've been doing with you guys and our clients over the past 12, 18 months, is striving to measure that more and more and put numbers on that, that have meaning for people, and that they can engage with, so that can make some improvements.
What's the one thing you would advise any leader of a critical team to do right now to improve their likelihood of success?
I'd be asking them to ensure that they're having conversations around priorities, results, and purpose. And it sounds simple, but I'd ask them to be curious and see what the conversation reveals when you get into having conversations, particularly with senior leaders who may be running operations and finance and marketing and sales and compliance and risk. So they all work into you potentially as a CEO or as a head of a business unit. And how do you is there alignment there, and what level of alignment is there? That would be one of the key things. But then I'd also ask you. So you asked me for one, so that's probably the first one. But then the second thing, I can do a segue into this. I'd be asking the team to think about what percentage of their potential are they realizing, as one question. What level of pressure team members are under. Is the team thriving right now? And where would it be on a scale of 0 to 100% in terms of thriving? And then back to that metric I mentioned earlier on, the return on collaboration. So 4 key metrics. So yeah, talk about alignment, priorities, results, and purpose. But also be thinking about these 4 key metrics. What's the potential? What's the pressure? What's the level of vitality? And what's the return on collaboration? And of course, if you want to improve alignment, you need to work on these numbers also. Yeah, so your potential score, you should be trying to realize more of your potential. Leadership teams that we're in right now, if you have 9 people across a leadership team, I'd be a betting person that 6 of them are operating at very, very high levels of pressure. So there is a level of risk of burnout. And are people taking their holidays? Are people taking the time to recover? And I think there's something that everybody needs to watch for a multitude of reasons going forward. Again, in sport, what do they take? They take time to recover. In business, we don't necessarily have that luxury.
So in addition to commercial KPIs, those kind of 4 numbers are what you're encouraging people any team to be looking at.
Yeah, if you want to move, so we talk about a performance paradox. The teams that we work with collectively below the line and ourselves, the majority of them are hitting their key performance indicators. But when we ask the team members what percentage of the team's potential has been realized, the average is around 64%, as we know. So that's a paradox. KPIs being realized, but potential not being realized, and in some cases up to 30% more potential to be realized. You can look at that through a glass half full lens, which means fantastic. Look at what's possible in terms of innovation, etc. But if you look at it through the other lens of glass half empty, you have to think about what that source of potential loss is doing in terms of frustration, energy, well-being, all of those various different things. I think we're at a real crossroads in terms for going into 2022 and 2023. If the performance potential benchmark of 64% stays 64%, it's going to have major impact on teams and organizations. And I think some of the research would suggest that maybe people will start to look in other places if they can't realize more of their potential, which will cause a potential challenge for talent retention and those types of things.
You're right. The performance paradox, as you say, it's an interesting one, and for me it points to a lot of teams that you and I work with, and we come across. They have in their head that high performance means I'm working hard, I'm working long hours, I'm putting in the time. But obviously Growth Pit Stop is based on Formula One, but the whole idea of a pit stop is to slow down in order to go faster. And if you look at the way they manage their processes, it's not designed to be, okay, the driver's going very fast, the car's going very fast, but the whole idea is for calmness in the cockpit, for calmness in the pit lane. So they're not, high performance to them is actually a calm, measured, less stressful place to be in. But there's something about teams thinking, oh no, well, in order for us to be high performing, I've got to feel like I'm working. Is that, would that be a view you would share, or what's your take on that?
Yeah, so I think it's interesting. So we talk about zones of performance potential, and anything over 75% is operating in what we would call the zone of peak performance. So the majority of teams that we work with at the start want to talk about high performance, and then we reframe things into this concept of performance and potential and where they are on the scale. So 75% would be kind of operating at 90% effectiveness 85% of the time. If you just think about that for a second, I'm being 90% effective 85 to 90% of the time. That's pretty high going, yeah, in terms of putting a metric on things. So yeah, it's, you know, where's the team and where are the individuals within the team in terms of realizing what's right for them and realizing what's winning for them, and are we all winning together, and can we slow down to speed up? When we slow down, are we able to keep that level of tension and cohesion together when we slow down, because we're used to going so fast? I think that's kind of an interesting area. Excitement and adrenaline is another dynamic that we talk a lot about. You see a lot of excitement and adrenaline in Formula One, but what type of excitement and adrenaline exists within your team? When do people get excited? When is there too much adrenaline? I know it always brings up a point for me about one of your colleagues, Jerry, mentioning, you know, kind of, and Ian talking about, you know, too much caffeine being drank, and are we dealing with an over caffeinated set of people? I think it's kind of interesting. So links to lots of different things. Formula One's a great metaphor because it, you know, it shows there's a lot of principles of speed, sense of urgency, but there's also principles like trust and respect, yeah, and, you know, ensuring the right people are in the right roles, yeah, doing the right work in the right way, ensuring that they're all focused in the right direction, yeah, that they can change their tires when they need to, yeah. So metaphorically, can your team change their tires, and what does that mean for your team? So there's lots in the metaphor that just kind of help people step in and reframe how they see performance. There's lots of people out there who do a better job than me talking about, you know, why you'd use a metaphor like Formula One. But what I've realized is that it just helps people see things in a slightly new way, and it depersonalizes and depoliticizes this concept of high performance, and what that really means. I think, interestingly enough, Formula One are going to have their own challenges, because they've now announced their new calendar, and the Formula One teams are going to get tired. They're already getting tired, and how do they maximize their potential? And that's going to be interesting. But that's another day's story.
Okay, and last question then. What's the one thing you would advise any leader of a critical team to do right now to improve their likelihood of success?
Press pause. Ask yourself about the 4 big numbers for your team, around what percentage of the team's potential is being realized, what level of pressure is the team under, what level of vitality exists within the team, and what percentage of the time the team is spending on valuable collaboration. I'd be asking the leader, him or her, to be thinking about those 4 things. And then I'd be asking them to reflect on what those numbers might say for themselves. What percentage of their own potential they're realizing? What level of pressure are they under themselves? What level of vitality do they see themselves having, and what's their own return on collaboration? I think I'd be asking them to. That's what I'd be starting to ask. Pause there and think of those things, and I'd say make sure you're talking about those things with your coach and with your team. That's what I'd be saying right now.
Fantastic, John. Thanks a million. We'll leave it there.
Cool.
Lovely stuff.
Great to chat to you.